Okay, so let's take a couple steps back in this last video of the day. We got another 15 minutes, and then I'm going to give you your in-class assignment that you'll work on and hand in to Professor Spack before you leave. But before you do that, let's do a quick review of place value. So when I come up with any number, for example, if I'm given the number 3, this is clearly a number that's in the ones place. And short version is, I know that's the case because that's how our place value works. If I gave you a number such as 23, well, that number would be broken up so that the 3 is in the ones place and the 2 is in the tens place. If the number was 123, then the 1 would be in the hundreds place, the 2 would be in the tens, and the 3 would be in the ones. And if we had more numbers such as 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, etc., we would see these added on to the different place values that we have available. However, what happens when you end up with a decimal? So what if I had 123.2? Well, again, the decimal point right here that we have at this point could be written as 123.2, where 2 is in the tenths place, followed by the hundredths place, thousands place, 10,000s, 100,000s. So what you need to know about this is that if the number was 123.25 hundredths, that would be in the hundredths place, or again, it's 2 digits after the decimal. If I had a third number such as 0, well, that would be in the thousands place. And this is important to note because for some of the problems that I may ask you to work on, I may tell you to, convert a fraction into a decimal up to the thousandths place, which means that after the decimal point, I need to have 1, 2, 3 places after the decimal point right here in which I need to see an answer. So let me give you an example of this. If I told you, take the fraction, again I'm going to go back to 3 halves. Again, what do you do when you convert a fraction into a decimal? You divide the bottom into the top. So 2 into 3. Okay, 3 is in my ones place. So it doesn't go in evenly because 2 times 2 is 2. So when I subtract this, I end up with a remainder. Whenever I end up with a remainder, I'm now going to add a decimal point, and before I even add a number up here, I'm already moving prematurely. I'm going to add a 0. I'm going to bring this 0 down here and put it below so that what I end up with is 10. So after my decimal point, I'm going to put in the value of 5. Why? Because 2 times 5 is 10. So I can subtract this, and what I'm going to end up with is 0. So what this tells me is that I can't go to the thousands place. My answer is 1.5, or in this case 1.5. If I look at my place value, the first value after the decimal point is tenths. So this answer would be 1.5 tenths. So when I say 3 and a half, or 3 halves, is equivalent or is equal to 1.5 tenths. So basically, whenever you are converting a fraction into a decimal, all you're really doing is dividing the bottom into the top. And for most cases, I may ask you to go 2 to 3 places after the decimal point. But it is important for you to memorize your place value here in terms of your ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, etc., but also know the place value after the decimal point, which are your tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000s, and so forth. For most examples, including the ones I'll give you in the final, or even in the quizzes for this class, you will only need to go as far as the thousandths, but you should know how to get there. So let's do an example where that would be the case. Alright, so let's come up with another alternative. Let's say for a moment I wanted you to divide 7 over 6. So again, convert into a fraction, which simply means divide the bottom into the top, which is 6 into 7. Well, 6 doesn't go into 7 evenly, so I'm just going to do 6 times 1 is 6, and end up with 1. Now, because there are no numbers after and I want to keep going, I'm going to add a decimal point right after my 1. I'm going to add a 0 below. I'm going to bring that down so that now I can continue subtracting. So what number goes into 10? Well, 6 times 2 is 12, so that's too big. So I'm going to multiply 6 times 2, which is 12, which is going to give me 8. Well, I'm not done yet, so I'm going to keep going in terms of an answer. So I'm going to add another 0, except now I'm going to bring it down. And what I'm going to do in this case is 6 into 80. Well, I do know that if I were to think about the 6 times 9, well, 6 times 10 is 60, right? So I'm going to have to go a lot higher because I'm not going to be able to find anything at that level. So maybe in this case, what I may want to consider is what other number could I try? Let's try a big number such as, well, what can go into 80? Well, I could do 6 times 13, which would only give me 78, so that's pretty close. 6 times 14 actually goes over. So in this case, I'm going to have to do, well, in this case, I'm going to have to go down even further. So what I can do in this case, oh my god, hold on one second, I'm about to run out of power here, hold on one second. Okay guys, sorry, because this is what happens when I record videos at 2:30 in the morning. This is wrong. It's not 12 because, I mean, okay, yeah, I know I'm tired. And it's not 2. So let's actually take a step back. I'm going to have to actually do this a little differently and say no. I'm going to actually multiply it again times 1. So 6 times 1 is 6. Becomes 4. Bring down another 0, and now it's 40. So now I'm going to multiply 6 times 6, which is 36. And I'm going to borrow, so now I'm going to find myself, wait a minute, with another 4. So if I were to add another 4 here, I'm going to keep repeating the same pattern because now it's going to end up with 40. The most I can continue is to keep multiplying 6 times 6. It's going to be 36, which I'm going to simply subtract, and I'm going to end up with 4, and it's going to repeat. So the way this answer would work, first of all, it's already at the tenths, hundredths, and thousands place. But because the 6 is going to keep going and repeating, what I can do is simply just put the value 1.166 with a line on top of the 66 because I know that it's going to keep going 1.166666 into infinity, and it's going to keep going. But the point is, my 1, if I were to write this in the place value chart, my 1 is in the ones, and anything after the decimal point starts off in the tenths value, so I go to 1 in the tenths, 6 in the hundredths, and 6 in the thousands, which is sufficient. So if I ask you to convert the fraction 7/6 into a decimal up to the thousands place, then I've done just that. In this case, the answer is 1.166. Alright, let's do another example. Let's say I gave you the fraction 3 over 2, and I simply asked you to convert it into a decimal point. So I'm going to divide the bottom into the top, 2 over 3. Well, again, this one was relatively easy in that it was 1.5, right? That one was straightforward, but what happens if we would change the value of this? What if instead of it being a third, I asked you instead to make this an eighth? Well, that makes life easier because now all we're really doing, if you think about this, is it's even. So we're going to end up with a whole number with no decimals afterwards. In this case, I would simply just divide 2 into 8. I know 2 times 4 is 8, and that's 0. Now, if I were to ask you to show me the answer up to the thousandths point, you would show me the answer as 4.000. Okay? And the reason is, again, although it's understood that this is the same thing as saying 4, what I want you to understand is that even with whole numbers, that just simply means that there are no remainders, so all the other values after this are going to be 0, 0, 0 onto infinity. All you really need to know is that in this case, 2 into 8 gives us 4, or 4.000, in the form of a decimal up to the thousandths place. Okay, last example before I have you guys work on this. Let's do one more example. In this case, I'm going to make it, in this case, 8 over 5. Convert this into a decimal. So I'm going to say 5 divided by 8. Well, I'm just going to simply go 5 times 1 is 5. So I'm going to subtract this and get a 3. There's no numbers after the 8 right here, so I'm going to make this a 0, but making sure I have a decimal point after the 1. I'm going to bring this 0 down, and it's going to become 30. So in this example, I already know that this is going to be pretty easy because 5 times 6 is 30. So therefore, my answer when I say convert 8/5 into a decimal is going to be 1/6. Now at this time, I'm going to give you a quick example for you to work on at your desks. Okay, very briefly, I want you to convert the following two problems that are fractions into decimals up to the thousandths place. So I want you to divide 5 over 2, and I want you to divide 8 over 7. Professor Spack, you can pause the video at this time. Okay, great. So now I'm going to start with the first problem. So I'm going to divide the bottom into the top, which is 2/5. Again, 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to subtract 5 into 4, which is 1. I'm going to add a decimal and a 0 because I need to keep going because, again, I don't want any remainders. So I'm going to bring down to 0. I'm going to multiply 2 times 5, which is 10. So my answer for number 1 is going to be 2.5 tenths. Again, because there's only one place after the decimal point. For number 2, I'm going to divide 7 into 8, which I'm just going to multiply 7 times 1, which is 7, which gives me a 1. I'm going to add a decimal point, bring a 0, and bring it down. Well, I can't go too far beyond that, so I'm going to do 7 times 1 again. And I get 3, so I'm going to add another 0. Bring that down. Well, in this case, I can go as far as 7 times 3 is 21, 7 times 4 is 28, 7 times 5 is 35, but that's too big, so I'm just going to add a 4, and 7 times 4 is 28, which gives us 2. I'm going to add one more 0, bring it all the way down, and I'm going to multiply 7 times, well, in this case, 2, which is 14, which gives me 6. So long story short, my answer here is going to be 1.142 thousandths, because it's, again, 3 places after the decimal point. As long as you get your 3 digits, if you keep going, that is sufficient to give us a decimal point up to the thousandths place. The next video that will come up is simply just going to explain the homework assignment for, actually it's going to be the in-class assignment that you're going to work on before you leave class tonight.